now. Hollywood, Hollywood, no looking down. Hollywood now. Hollywood, Hollywood, no looking down. Hollywood now.
Hello, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in for another interview with King Solomon Entertainment here on Hollywood Now. We're so excited to bring you another great interview today. Before we get started with our wonderful guests we have today, please make sure you guys share this link. Make sure you guys subscribe, share, and connect with us. We want to hear from you. Send us an official email address at our official website, King Solomon Entertainment, and make sure you guys connect with us at our email. We're glad to hear from you guys at our official website. Our email address is on there. If you want to partner, sponsor with us, make sure you guys do that. And so if you guys have not already subscribed, we're on Facebook, Instagram, and we on YouTube as well. So make sure you guys connect with us on that. So you have information there. So please, we are so excited to get right into this next interview. You don't want to waste no time. A friend to the show, he's been on here before. He is an award-winning Los Angeles founder, writer, director, founder of Cinemation Studios. He worked with so many wonderful people such as Spike Lee, acclaimed Netflix film called Science Guy. He also done a wonderful project with Amazon, Immortal Warriors. Now this wonderful, great new project he has coming out alongside executive producer LeBron James and Stanley Nelson that he's here to talk about today. Can't wait to hear from about it today. Executive producer and director of this great project called After Jackie. We have again friend to the show, the wonderful Andre Gaines.
How's it going, man? Good to see you.
Oh man, good to see you again. It's always a pleasure every time you come on and to share with us. It's so amazing. The trailblazing work that you're doing, the type of project that you're doing. You know, like I told you before, and here you are again with another great project. We cannot wait to hear about it. Please introduce yourself for those who may not know. Please let them know who you are.
Sure. So my name is Andre Gaines. I'm a writer, director, producer, founder of Cinemation Studios. We've produced series for HBO, for Showtime, for Netflix, for Peacock. And the film that I recently directed is called After Jackie, and that's for the History Channel. And that's also executive produced by LeBron James, Maverick Carter, Stanley Nelson, and myself. And it's the story of the black ball players, the unsung heroes that came after Jackie Robinson in the game of baseball, after Jackie Robinson integrated the game. And it was about time to really give these guys their due.
No, absolutely. You also brought to us the wonderful Dick Gregory documentary as well, which was another great find and project of yours that you've done. And so we want to know, like, what inspired you to get behind these wonderful, great projects? Because there's so, it's a lot there, and it's wonderful to hear. And you always bring us something that we did not know. I know that's probably one of your goals. But what inspired you to pick the project that you picked?
Sure. So I end up, I have a personal mission of telling the stories of these unsung heroes, but really as a filmmaker and as a documentarian is putting these stories, these events, these historical moments, these great historical figures, really putting them in their proper place, and almost like a museum curator finding a precious artifact and putting it on display at a museum and putting it in its right place so that the world can really see it, and they end up getting a level of education while being wildly entertained, because that's our first and foremost goal and obligation as storytellers, is to entertain people. It's the old adage of putting the broccoli in the brownie. So you have something sweet there, but you're still getting your vegetables. So that's kind of the idea. And I think for me personally, especially after the Dick Gregory experience, that mission came a little more into focus of what it really means to tell these stories and to highlight them.
Wow, amazing. And so with this project, I know it's a lot of history there, and it's for the History Channel. A lot of times we don't want to confuse the great contribution of Jackie Robinson because he done a wonderful, wonderful work. But this also lets us know the behind the scenes and the stuff that we did not know as far as what Jackie did do, and then the work that was still left to be done after he retired. And when these gentlemen comes in and to make their contribution, which was what this movie is about as well, right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, it's twofold. There, After Jackie is about the title really stands for not only the guys that came after Jackie, but it stands for the Jackie Robinson that came after the one that we all know.
Mm,
And the Jackie Robinson that we all know really kind of starts and ends with integration of baseball, right?
right.
I mean, that's the story of almost every Jackie Robinson film that we've seen. But our story really starts after Jackie Robinson retires and he becomes a very, very prominent and very influential civil rights activist, literally marching alongside Dr. King, Harry Belafonte, Ralph Abernathy, Andrew Young, all of the civil rights leaders of the day. He's there marching, giving speeches, protesting, and standing up for freedom and equality, and being an agitator. Somebody to there to stir it up. And that's not the version of Jackie that we know. The version of Jackie that we know, Jackie Robinson that we know, is pretty angelic and sort of has been sanctified because of what it is that he did. But
Yeah.
he was really a powerful figure that a lot of people don't know the true story of. And then after that, you hear the stories of our three main protagonists, who are Bill White, Bob Gibson, and Curt Flood on the St. Louis Cardinals. And you have these three guys who were proteges of Jackie Robinson. And he was a mentor to them. He was a guide. He was an advocate. He was a supporter. He was a guru, even down to the point of, writing telegrams on their behalf, or showing up to protest on their behalf, to move into white neighborhoods, have equal housing when the team wanted to stay with the black players, wanted to stay with the white players, and vice versa, and things like that. So there was just a lot going on behind the scenes. And the last thing I'll say about this is that with these players, in many regards, they almost had it worse than Jackie,
Mm,
because with Jackie, he had the attention of the world on him. He had a global press that was looking at what it is that he was doing on the field and off the field. These guys didn't have the cameras uh, with them. They didn't have the cameras around them when they were stepping out on the field and getting beer bottles thrown at them and being
no,
jeered at and
yeah,
called
yeah,
names.
yeah.
So
That's
it's really an enlightening process for me as well.
no. That's the type of detail in which I was talking about because although we know Jackie Robinson being a model, but we also know from his story that it was also a push from mainstream that wanted it to happen, and so he had to, appear to be this angelic figure, and it had to work for integration to Major League Baseball to happen, and so there was parameters there to ensure
Mm-hmm.
that happened. And like you said, when that was removed, now here come not say real, I'll leave the adjectives out. Here come integration. Those who would walk in that and truly live in
Mm-hmm.
that, what it looked like, when other players begin to follow him, like you said, when they do not have the world looking, and what that was like, So
Right.
that's
Right.
what's so important about this story. I believe it's a universal story because that happens often, not just in baseball, but all together when the model person or the token person go in and kick that door down. Then a lot of people come behind it to keep it open or to,
Right.
really live in what's really going on, even after the media has portrayed it to be always integrated. No, it's still some challenges
No, not at all. I mean, it's really an American story, like you
there.
said.
American
It's
story, yeah.
if you know, because the interesting thing about this is that I, prior to LeBron and his team asking me to do this, um, I did tell them that I was not a baseball aficionado.
Hmm.
I'm a fan of all live sports. I mean, if I,
Yes,
get to go watch baseball or get to go watch football or whatever it is, sure. But as far as being a baseball guy, as like a
yes.
guy who knows stats and who, it's like if you guys asked me who won the World Series in 1972, I couldn't tell you, left from right. But and they say, well, that's kind of what we're looking for because
Yes,
you're a filmmaker and we want someone who's focused on cinemas, which is what I said,
yes, yes,
and not the stats and not the kind of all the things that typically come with sports fandom, not just
yes.
baseball, but any sports fandom. And so, but the interesting thing about that process was that baseball story is really America's story.
Yes.
And you can track, like, if you look at the history of baseball, you can track the history of the country actually through the game.
Wow.
And just even, for instance, when baseball, so a lot of people don't realize that there were black baseball players before Jackie Robinson.
Yes.
So the two prominent ones that we mentioned in the movie, Bud Fowler, Moses Fleetwood Walker, these were two players that were actually in the game. Bud Fowler being the first one. And in 1884, this ban gets instituted by the best player at the time, a guy named Cap Anson, who was a rabid racist, just like
Hmm.
everybody else. And he said, I don't want to play with black ball players anymore, and refused to play an exhibition game in Newark. He was on the Chicago team, and it was a gentleman's agreement. They institute this gentleman's agreement that effectively bans black players from the game, and it's not something that's written down. It's just a handshake, and that would consume the sport for the next 60 years until Jackie Robinson shows up. But at that same time in history and in our nation's history, uh, a lot of people don't realize post Reconstruction, 1865 Emancipation Proclamation, and then post Reconstruction, where we're sort of living in a period of Renaissance. It's probably the most black wealth in the country at the time, the most entrepreneurship, the most educated cohort at that period of time, and then also a large, meaningful representation in Congress of black representatives who are literally ousted uh, through a gentleman's agreement in Congress to not be able to serve. I mean, you just go on YouTube and you can find this stuff. It's not buried somewhere. And so you can really track the history of the country through the game. It's the same thing that we see that's happening in the game is really the same thing that's happening in the country. And that's where we are right now with the percentage of black ball players being around 7 or 8%, which is the equivalent to what it was when Jackie Robinson retired in 1957.
Wow.
And so we sort of see this wave where things are getting kind of expansive and then just eventually falling apart. And that's not unlike what we see in multiple industries in our country.
Wow. I didn't even know there was two players prior to Jackie that was in Major League Baseball. That was you don't even hear about. That's very
No,
that's
you don't. It's almost like, at first when I heard it, I was kind of like, is this like, the first black president kind of thing where
mhm.
there was a black president, and there was, it's like there was. It wasn't the president of the union, but there was an African American that was in the office before Barack Obama in that way, in the same way that there were congressional leaders. But in this case, yes, these guys were playing in the version of the major leagues back then, and they were banned. You know, they were banned and kicked out of the league. And those are just two. There were multiple. There were multiple. Those were like kind of like the first two sort of Jackie Robinsons of their day,
Yeah.
but modern baseball, and which also happened to coincide with the modern civil rights movement, because there were multiple civil rights movements before the one that we know in the 60s, but there are multiple, but modern civil rights movement that coincided with Jackie Robinson breaking the color barrier. And so it's not, so he gets the credit that he's due as breaking the color barrier, but it's more important to say that he was the first black player allowed to play in Major League Baseball, as opposed to the first black player to play Major League Baseball, because that's not accurate.
Wow, interesting. And what clarity. And you know, you definitely get the insight and the clarity that you need, because you place things in proper perspective, because what you didn't know. And now moving forward, you have a better perception of what's really going on and what's being told and what's not being told. And that's really
Yeah, right.
thanks to you guys for doing that. That's amazing. So after Jackie, this is what this tells. What was it like working with executive producer Mr. Nelson and LeBron James?
Well, Stanley is a genius. Stanley Nelson, for if I mean he's not as a large of a household name, obviously, as LeBron James. I mean, but then again, who is? But for folks who don't know, um, he's was recently Oscar nominated for a film called Attica
Mm,
that was on Showtime. That came out, same year that Dick Gregory film came out. Multiple Emmy winning, director and producer for documentaries, has been around for a very long time, and it's kind of the godfather of the craft in many regards. And so he had a lot of great tricks up his sleeve that were helpful to try to get me through a fairly speedy process. We had a great team of editors, we had a great team of story producers. LeBron James, and he has a fantastic team. His company Spring Hill Uninterrupted has a great team of producers and storytellers and filmmakers in their own right that serve as executives there. So it was a all hands on deck situation. One that couldn't have been executed without all the players and key players involved. MLB was also a partner. They have this huge archive that dates back to 1906.
mm,
So a lot of the footage that you see in the film um, came from that archive. The Jackie Robinson Foundation, Della Britton, who runs that, she was fantastic. Just behind the scenes photos and videos and things like that of Jackie Robinson. I'll be going back to New York on the Jackie Robinson Museum opens on July 26th. So I'll be there for the opening and then also the screening. They'll be screening the movie again.
amazing.
Um, and so yeah, it was great. It's a lot of work. A lot of
Yeah.
people see the end result, and it's kind of like you
No, I
know
can only imagine. And so, now that you have, experienced the end result, what would be your end result articulation and, in your words, the universal message of After Jackie? Now that it's over, now that you finish filming and it's showing everywhere.
Well, I think that the universal message about Jackie Robinson himself is really that his legacy is what he did for others. Um, Him breaking the color barrier was probably the least important thing that he did. It was all the stuff that came after, and that rarely gets any credit at all or any attention. We always see this version of Jackie Robinson as a young, vibrant soldier, you know, uh, standing there with his Dodgers uniform and his bright blue hat and his baseball cocked over his shoulder. And it's kind of like, okay, that's the symbolism of that. That's our symbol. That's our crucifix. You know, that's our Martin Luther King standing at the podium at the March on Washington. You know, that's our Barack Obama, you know, standing in front of the Lincoln Memorial, like whatever it is. It's like we have these symbols without the context of what either got them there or, more importantly, the things that they did after these specialty incidents or moments in time. And that's the truth with Jackie Robinson, that his true legacy is when Jackie was a, you know, older man. He died as a fairly young man, age 53, but back in those days that was considered pretty old. And but as an older man in his late 30s and his 40s, suffering from diabetes, early onset diabetes, suffering from you know, multiple injuries, aches, pains, all of those types of things, but out there on the ground, traversing all across the country, marching, giving speeches, shaking hands, coming down there and really, you know, risking not only his life but his livelihood in the pursuit of freedom and justice. And he was doing that, you know, at a time that he was pretty ill. And a lot of people, we don't see that because it's messy, it's not angelic. You know, he's got gray hair by that time. He's you know, a tad overweight by that time. He's just, you know, but he's out there doing the work, and we don't get to see him rolling up his sleeves. We finally get to see that in this movie.
Oh, amazing, amazing! Again, I could say this. It's always the details with you, Andre. You know, it's always, hey, you guys need to know about this. You guys need
Yeah,
to
yeah.
really, really pay attention to this. This is what's really, really
Well,
important.
that's the beauty of
Yeah,
filmmaking. You know, that's
yeah.
why I like it. Is that any director that you talk to is going to be, we're obsessive about details.
Yeah.
Obsessive about details. That's sort of part of the, and I'm naturally obsessive about details. So being a director was sort of a perfect fit. You know, for me.
Wow. So we just want you to share with our audience, you know, take away from, you know, this interview and from the film. Please encourage them, you know, what we tell them to come out. What would they expect, you know, to see from it? You know, just encourage them to come out and go see it, go support it, and then let them know where they can find you at.
Yeah, so the film is available on the History Channel app. It's came out on the History Channel on June 18th and has been running multiple times. So you can find it if you have a cable subscription, like Verizon, Spectrum, AT&T, those types of things, Comcast. You can find it on demand there. But if you also want to stream it, then you can stream it over the History Channel app. And then I can be found on Instagram mainly at Andre L. Gaines. Um, and That's where I really am. I'm not really on any of the other platforms. I have, like, people think I'm on Facebook or they think I'm on Twitter or something just because it's all kind of like connected. But no, I don't really spend any time on there at all. Instagram is kind of the only place. So yeah, so if folks want to find me, that would be a great place to do it. Is at Andre L. Gaines on Instagram.
Now, why should people go and see this film? Why should they go see it?
Well, you're going to laugh, you're going to cry, you're going to be anxious and nervous at times. You're going to be enthralled and enthused at times. You know, people should see it because it's, you know, 2 hours of your life that you have to that you get essentially to devote to a very entertaining history lesson, especially when you get a chance to learn about Bill White, Bob Gibson, and Kurt Flood. I mean, Bob Gibson, for instance, it was a dominant pitcher for people who don't know. I mean, so dominant, in fact, that they had to lower the mound, the pitching mound, because of how dominant he was as a pitcher, but how frightening he was to so many people. And people, would get up to bat and just be, cowering in fear because of these fast balls that were coming. He only had two types of pitches, and they were coming at you fast and hard. And he also was so intimidating that a lot of people got hit by these balls, or he hit them, or just claimed that they never got out of the way. And so we have a cool sequence in the film of showing these moments when Bob Gibson is just drilling people, at the plate, who are up to bat. And it's those types, again, details and stories about this figure that a lot of people probably have never heard of, who was a huge figure in the baseball world, passed away in late 2020. But someone who had a connection to what has changed today, to the change that we see today. And that's the case with Bill White as well, who's probably the second most important African-American in the game of baseball, next to Jackie Robinson. That's the same with Curt Flood, who people may have heard of, who was responsible for what we know as modern day free agency across all of sport, not just baseball, across all of sport. Again, these things that are happening in the game of baseball are American stories that are having an impact across our entire society. Wow. So it's just cool to see. And as a non-baseball geek or nerd or whatever you want to call it, I deliberately made it so that it's entertaining to the average person who does not have any relationship, to baseball. That way.
And after all your finding, can you say now you are more of a baseball lover, or you can enjoy it?
Sure, yeah, I can actually.
You can appreciate it more, at least.
I can definitely appreciate it more. I mean, it's the funny thing is that I have, I grew up playing golf and tennis, right? So golf is as boring to people as baseball is probably to other people. And then tennis, again, I think got heavily popularized because of Venus and Serena.
Yes.
In the Black community. Yes. But grew up playing tennis. My dad was a tennis player, state level tennis player. I was as well, so I just grew up playing the game. My kids play it. So it sort of has to do with how you grow up. If you grew up playing baseball and you were in Little League and you went to games and you did that type of thing. But that's really the problem that's happening right now, is that the game has gotten so expensive. Golf and tennis are expensive sports. They've always been expensive sports. Yes. But then now baseball is an expensive sport because of all the travel that's required, the cost of entry into the clubs, all of these types of things that now have created this huge barrier of entry for the average Black and brown kid who cannot afford, to join these clubs or to travel, who have working parents who aren't able to cart them around all over the place, as opposed to just, going to play in Little League or around the corner at whatever. Like those leagues and those organizations are totally dismissed in the grand scheme of baseball and the trajectory of actually becoming a professional baseball player. And so that means that you're not going to see Black and brown kids. And if that's something that's been instituted, 20 years old, and it's just sort of grown over time, then yes, every year that's 10% less of a Black audience or a player pool that you're able to pull from, 5 to 10% less, to the point where we are now, where it's at Jackie Robinson retirement levels, which just really doesn't make any sense at all. So having learned a lot about the game and learned a lot about the way that the game is played and understanding it, has made me look at, listen, and pay attention to a lot more baseball shit than I've ever have before.
Absolutely.
So that's definitely a new thing for me.
Wow. So thank you so much for joining the platform once again. Thank you so much for your continued contribution in film and just giving us things that we might not have known now that we know thanks to you. Andre Gaines, founder of Cinemation Studios. After Jackie, make sure you guys go and check that out. Thank you so much. And again, whenever you have anything else, please come back. Friend to the show, Andre Gaines. And have a great rest of your day. I have to come out in person and support you. You got to invite me to come out.
Oh, sure, absolutely. You're welcome to come anytime, man. Now that I know that you're on my coast.
Okay, then for sure. I will.
Okay, good
Okay,
talking
then
to
let
you.
me know.
All right,
Then.
I'll
Thank you
see
so
you
much.
soon.
All
Bye-bye.
right.
Bye-bye.
There you go, guys. Another great interview on Hollywood Now. Founder of Cinemation Studio, Andre Gaines, After Jackie on the History Channel. Make sure you guys check that out. Make sure you guys share this link. Make sure you guys subscribe if you have not. The links are in the comments. Also, Instagram, King_Solomon_ENT_. Make sure you guys click the link in the bio as well on IG and go to our other platforms. Thank you guys so much for your your support. We want to hear from you, comment from you. Official website, kingsimon.entertainment.tv. Send us an email. Come on the show. We'd love to have you. Until next time, guys. Thank you so much.
Yeah, Hollywood.